Thank you for staying with us on Health Digest. We are discussing palliative care as part of this series on the burden of cancer to many of us. All of us have been affected in one way or the other when we're talking about cancer. And I'd like to just take one or two comments from part of our audience today.
My name is Pastor Dina Samena, and I'm a breast cancer warrior survivor. So I want to thank God also for this day. And I want to say that I went through that journey in an easy way. That was 2015 because of standing on the Word of God. It helped me a lot to go through it. That month, April, when I was diagnosed in 2015, I was teaching people why God allows evil in the world. So I knew that God had allowed it for a reason. So it helped me to go through it. And I'm still standing strong. I know that when you stand on the Word of God through all this that we go through, you will find that you are very strong. I know it is a hectic journey for most people, financially, spiritually, emotionally, as Mercy has said. But I want to encourage somebody somewhere that when you stand on Jesus, you will see yourself going through this in a very good way.
I'd just like to say, in my clinical practice, especially when we go visit the hospice and the palliative care centers, it will be better if also the family are given psychoeducation, because also you find that when you interact with the patients and you find out that they're mostly in denial stage because they're going through the grieving process, and there's no one to tell them exactly in how they understand, how they'll be able to understand in their own layman languages, because we're going to tell them how we've been taught, this is the stage, this is what you do, but they will not understand that I'm going to feel this way, there's no reason for me to feel this way. So I think that psychoeducation is a very important process. While counseling the family or the patient, you should also counsel them in what brings about this, so that when they go through that grieving stage, whether they'll be able to become warriors or whether they'll be able to go through the actual death process, they can be able to begin their healing before and after.
Terry, have your family members or relatives that are close to you, including your husband, gone through any psychoeducation as Sharon is talking about? Has there been any form where you get any conversation at all about your diagnosis?
I only discussed this with my husband because my children were in school, and especially my last born girl was doing her Form 4 class. So we decided not even to tell her what mom is going through, because we thought that it could affect her performance. So we kept her aside. She was in a boarding school, and we didn't involve her at all. But my son, who was a first year in university, we told him about it. With the dad, we shared, and we informed them what we talked about it. He could also take care of me when the dad was at work. He could even cook, and he became even the messenger in the home because he was very flexible, and he's a grown-up, a university student is a grown-up boy. So that's the far we shared. I didn't tell my mom. My mom, I avoided telling her because she was very secret, and I thought maybe if I tell my mom this and she has just been discharged from hospital, she'll die. So I kept it off my mom. And I came to tell her about it when I finished treatment. Yes.
Okay. John, from your experience, do the people around the patient, are they part of the conversation when you're talking about diagnosis and how to handle it and go about it?
Well, it depends. It's varied. In some cases, yes. In some cases, no.
Mm-hmm. So what do you see most of the time?
Most of the time is that you'd find that people are, first of all, they do not know what they have to deal with, based on the news that they get to hear from outside there that people are suffering, and this is it's a death sentence. So at the first instance, you find that people are quite confused about how to handle the situation. That is the immediate family members. But again, it depends from on a case-to-case basis. In some instances, people recollect them sooner rather than later, and get to support the patients.
Mercy, how important is it to have the immediate family members and relatives involved in the conversation about taking care of somebody who's been diagnosed with cancer, who's going through the last stages of cancer, for example? How important is it to have them there, as we'd had in previous conversations, that the patient may accept the diagnosis, but the people around them do not want to accept what's happening, and they want to try everything else, even when the situation demands differently? How important is it to have them be part of the conversation?
The family in palliative care, even from the definition, is a unit of care. You take care of the patient and you take care of the family. And what you have to realize is that in response to bad news, and cancer is one bad news, patients go through phases. And the same phases, the family goes through them. And what you need to realize is at what stage do I find this patient, and at what stage do I find the family? And you cannot handle them together in the same way. If the patient has gone through the cycles of grief, and by the time you accept bad news, first of all, you go through denial. After denial, you go through bargaining. You start praying and hoping what you had was not true. After bargaining, you go through acceptance. After bargaining, you go into depression. And this is healthy depression, because it starts making you now realize this thing I was told was not a hoax. It is true. I have this disease. So after you've gone through depression, then you come to accept. And what we find in the field is that most patients accept long before the family members. The patient has accepted this thing is going in this particular direction, and they even start talking about it. And they even start doing wills, and they start doing advanced directives. But the family is still back there at the denial stage. So how do you handle them? You have to handle them at the level you find them. You cannot accelerate the process on anyone. You have to handle them slowly until they come to a point of acceptance. And once you find patients and families that have accepted, it becomes very easy. Because number one, they do not undergo unnecessary medical expense, and they do not get cheated. You have to know out there are many liars who want to make money out of this misfortune. But when you find patients and relatives who have come to a full understanding, this is what is going to happen, we have accepted it, and we have released these patients, and they take you now to the next step. How do we discuss end of life? Then you start that discussion. It becomes way, way easier. So you can never, ever leave the family behind. The family has to walk with you if this patient is to get care. And then you cannot camp in that house. You're going to leave these people with that patient. They need to know, now this patient is bedridden, what do we do? Do we run to hospital back and forth? Insurance has walked away. We have used all the money we had. What do we do? How do we accept a death happening at home?
One of the things that I would say about palliative care is that we always know palliative care is supposed to be at the end of life, when we're preparing for this person to exit this earth. But cancer is, the nature of cancer as a condition, it's not your one size fits all. It's not like your headache where you take a painkiller and it disappears. It's a condition that deals with you as a person, those who are around you, your mental, your financial, your everyday life. So it's not just about getting the chemotherapy. It's not about just getting the surgery done or the radiotherapy and you're okay. Like what Daktari said, the grief patterns that you go through from denial that are not related with the treatment, but you still have to have them sorted out for you to be able to go through that process. So it's essentially what she's talking about is what we call as complementary therapies. I remember every single time when I'd go for my treatment, I would be in pain, in a lot of pain. my back would be aching, my head would be aching. But only later did I realize that I didn't need the morphine, I did not need the painkillers. What I needed was somebody to sit me down and tell me what you're having is psychosomatic pain, which is pain that comes from the anxiety attacks and manifests itself as a physical condition. So palliative care is not just at the end of the day. Like what you said, every single day, whether this patient has 5 years, 2 years, 2 days, it's the quality of that day. It's the quality of giving that patient, even if they're leaving us, how are they leaving us? We always have a very dark joke among cancer survivors that we're lucky enough to know how we're going to exit. So we're lucky enough to actually plan ahead and know that if I'm going to live, this is how I'd want to live.
When you know the cancer that you're trying to treat, it is very easy for you to manage your cancer at a lower cost and in a more efficient way. Because with the liquid biopsy, this one needs to be understood very well, that you need to check for anything that is causing any tumors in your body, and you need to check for all the types of the mutations that can occur in your body at the same period of time. And we have 100 types of cancers according to the research, with 900 subtypes of cancers. And with the women, they have got only 2 types of cancer that can be tested at an early stage. And we have been talking all along about early diagnosis. Early diagnosis can only be done on women, on cervical cancer and breast cancer only. And on men, they can only do prostate cancer only. What about these other 90-something cancers? And with the other 900 subtypes that are available in the market. So we have to go through a system that gives us the right information. Cancer is like sugarcane. I come from a county where they grow sugarcane. When you look at the sugarcane, you can cut it off, but the roots will still give out another crop. But when you are treating cancer, you need to go into the root cause of it and uproot it so that you can finish everything that is there. Because cancer spreads a lot in a span of very few months, or very few weeks, or very few times. And I believe that cancer is a genetic disease, and anyone believes that. So when you treat cancer and test cancer in a genetic perspective, you will find the root cause of what is causing this cancer, how far it has spread, and on that, using the technology that is available, you can be able to find the targeted therapies for the targeted genes that you will have gotten, and after that, it is easy for you to monitor the condition.
Of late, cannabis, of which I believe you've done some research and even written a book about, has become a big commodity, underground commodity, I must say. Because when we come to cancer patients, a lot of our cancer patients are looking for it, and they're demanding it because it is part of a palliative treatment, though illegal, which means we are criminalizing treatment. Because at the end of the day, as a caregiver and as a patient, I have to go look for it because the patients are demanding it. And true enough, a lot of information we have got, feedback we have got, is that it is alleviating their pain. Now, the government can see the whole world is embracing it. If we go to the Western world, they have embraced medicinal cannabis. We grow it. We have acres and acres of cannabis in our land. We cannot deny that fact. But we still criminalize it. John, in your research, is our government hiding its head in the sand? Or what is really going on? Because if we can be able to lead and alleviate some of this suffering from our patients, what is the problem?
The major obstacle we have is that what we have is conflicting and or rather confusing regulatory framework. What many people do not know is that the law as it is actually allows for medicinal use of cannabis, and this has been there for over 100 years, starting from 1913 when we had the Abuse of Opiates Prevention Ordinance, to 1945 when you have the Dangerous Drugs Act, and now to the Anti-Narcotics and Psychotropic Substances Act. All these provisions of law stretching back 100 years ago, and this is what I discovered when I started my research. They have always had provisions for medicinal use of cannabis. The challenge we have is that this information has not been out there, first of all. So many people do not know that they can legally use cannabis as medication, but they'd have to have, again, a medical prescription. So we have, on one hand, the law allows you to use cannabis as medication. But you also find that there are not so many doctors who are ready to prescribe for you cannabis, basically because of reputational risks that are still involved, and again because of stigma.
Which law, which segments of the law specifically?
Right now we have Section 3, subsection 3 of the Narcotics and Psychotropic Substances Control Act, which provides exception for medicinal use as long as you have a medical prescription. This stems from way back to 1913, from the first law that we had prohibiting use of cannabis. Now, the other challenge that we have is what the law gives, by one hand, takes away from the other, in the sense that, yes, possession for use as medicine is allowed, but the law does not have a provision for cultivation. So there's need to have a policy, some kind of a framework to allow for cultivation, manufacture, and distribution. So you could still be arrested for distribution, for cultivation, yet you're allowed to use as a medicinal. So the challenge is, where do you get this drug? Where do you get cannabis? If you're not allowed to have it at any particular point, unless you have it in your possession to use. So that's one of the challenges that we have as a country.
We'll have a specific discussion on cannabis, because many other countries actually process cannabis for medicinal use. But this is a conversation we'll have on another time, because we are time struck. And so I'd like to just get closing comments from you, one or two words that you'd like to say as we close this conversation.
Okay, from what I went through, and I found that nobody is really there for what the patients are going through, plus their families. I decided to join a counseling and psychology class, which I'm still a student and in my second year. On the other hand, I decided, even if I have not finished or have not done with my classes, I started the mentorship. I go meeting the patients. Whenever I find a patient, or if through networking, I ask, somebody tells me I have a patient, I go meet that patient. I try to encourage the patient by telling her or him, that cancer is not a death row. And I go there personally, tell them, look at me. I've gone through chemo. Here's my hair. Here's my health. Here's my skin. So you can as well go through it. It's not a death row. That's the encouragement that I have today for our patients. And for our caregivers, let's just try to love our patients. Let's just try to cope. You know, what they are going through, you may not understand exactly what they are going through psychologically, but just love them. Stay close to them. I also want to create awareness in the caregivers. Know what triggers the conflict. The moment you know what triggers the conflict, you try to avoid it, or you try to go another way. And to some extent, do not just let the patient stay at the same place or wrong. Hearing one thing, one word, cancer, day 1, day 2, let this patient change the moods, change activities, even go for a picnic with the patient. Let that patient feel accepted, he or she is loved, and let the patient even plan for future. There is future for cancer patients.
It's clear that cancer is a burden to many families. It's a major issue that affects many families in this country. What I think the government needs to do is that, apart from policy formulation, the government needs to go into the implementation stage so as to establish more centers that have comprehensive Medicare for cancer patients.
Palliative care is the one discipline of medicine that accepts everybody. Because if you've listened to the patient carefully, her needs are not just doctored, nurse-centered. Her needs are community-centered. So palliative care is the one thing that we try to train everyone. We try to train people who have never been to a medical class, people who didn't do very well in biology, because sometimes it's the care from the heart really, not the care from the head and the knowledge. So it's open, and we also try completely to drag in the clergy, because we notice that clergy has been locked out of hospital. There is a time clergy was very much part of hospital, chapels, imams, they were in hospitals dealing with patients. But right now they go to hospital and there is no time for them. And the doctors want to do their thing, the nurse want to do their procedure, and they are seen as if they are on people's way. So I would request, if anybody would hear my cry, that the theology schools should have a portion of palliative care, because these patients are out there in our churches, these patients are out there in the community. In fact, majority of patients are not in the hospital. Majority of patients live with us. And if we care hard enough to look, we will find them, and you will know that everybody has a role.
Very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think the message is a holistic and comprehensive approach to cancer care, and not just to introduce palliative care when it's end of life, but just at the beginning of the diagnosis, not just for the patient, but also for the family members, for the caregivers of this particular patient, so that they walk through this journey of cancer. I was with Terry Wanjiku, who's a cancer warrior. She's a mentor. John Ochola, who's an author and a cannabis advocate. And last but not least is Mercy Kamau, who's a senior palliative care nurse. That's all that we had for you on this particular episode on the burden of cancer, looking at palliative care. This has been Health Digest, your authoritative health show. I'm Dr. Mercy Korir, and we relay a special thanks to Amref Health Africa for hosting Health Digest, this particular series on the burden of cancer, and for Limau Cancer Connection for making this possible. Thank you, and I leave you with this week's edition of Patient's Diary.
He smiles broadly as he chats the evening away with his younger brother who has just returned home from school. Emmanuel Kipkemboi is the name of the biblical David, who has fought and continues to fight bravely against this Goliath cancer. He fell sick when he was 5 years old while at Elimu Nursery School. He was later diagnosed with leukemia.
I was feeling pretty weak. Very weak, and I couldn't even listen to the teacher. I was very drowsy. Yeah.
Doctor called me. I went to his clinic and we sat down with him. He took me through and asked me if I know anything about cancer. Then I told him, yes, I have heard, and I only know that it is the sickness of the rich people, as it is so like. After we talked, he told me that the diagnosis has been found that Emmanuel is having a blood cancer, leukemia, and he needs some special treatment.
Since then, the journey has not been easy. At some point, Emmanuel felt like giving up.
The thing that has been tough is all the medications that I took. It was every morning I woke up to 2 shots. Every evening I slept with more than 4 shots. The chemotherapy, one day when I got drilled, it was such painful. It was so painful. I couldn't sleep without feeling a pinch or something.
Most of the challenges that we have got is financial challenges. Secondly, sometimes you have to, for like the 1 year that we stayed in Madrid, I had to first decide to leave there, my entire family first, and then concentrate a lot on Emmanuel.
Over the years, he has undergone treatment at Kenyatta National Hospital, Aga Khan, Gertrude Children's Hospital, and MP Shah. The ray of hope came when a Catholic priest assisted them to get a slot at a hospital in Spain.
When we reached there, he was afresh taken for evaluation test, and after which he started immediately the chemotherapy. which lasted for 3.5 years. He responded very well to the chemo treatment. However, he had the normal side effects of chemo drugs, like loss of hair, some some scars on the body, vomits, and loss of weight, serious loss of weight. Sometimes they will be low on blood, sometimes they will be low on platelets.
Emmanuel goes for monthly checkups at Aga Khan Hospital, where he spends more than 10,000 shillings for accommodation, consultation fees and drugs. He also requires a strict balanced diet, full of foods such as milk, spinach and beans, which are rich in protein and vitamin. He is currently on remission, meaning a period of temporary recovery, and is not using any cancer-related drugs.
Being almost freed from cancer, it feels great, but yes, I would like to have a chance with those that have that disease to tell them you can do it. Yeah? Because I made it, why can't you?
Recently we went for a checkup in Madrid, and he's said to be on remission now. Almost 98% free from cancer. And the only effect that he's now fighting from is something like post-treatment disorders, which are being associated with some use of the chemo. But so far, so good.
Kemi Shoganle said, quote, "The strongest people I have met have not been given any easier life. They have learned to create strength and happiness from dark place," end quote. This has been true in the life of Emmanuel, whose dream is to become a journalist or an actor in the near future. For Emmanuel, his hunger for life continues to burn through his young eyes. His only hope is that one day he will be able to ring that bell to symbolize a clean bill of health. Joanne Letting in Sachangwan area, Nakuru County.